We've been informed that there will be votes about 1:30 today, but it's just one vote, so maybe we can work out some can go vote and some can come back, and we can maybe do it without a break. This afternoon, the House Armed Services Committee meets to receive testimony from commanders of the United States Central Command and the United States Special Operations Command on the posture of their respective commands. It's an understatement, perhaps, to say recent events give this hearing an even greater urgency. Developments in the past 6 months, and especially in the past 6 weeks, present new opportunities and new uncertainties for our nation's security and the environment in which CENTCOM and SOCOM operate. Extremist Islamist groups and their use of terrorism directly threatens the physical security of American citizens at home and abroad. Consequently, in Afghanistan, 100,000 U.S. servicemen and women are fighting to disrupt, dismantle, and eventually defeat al-Qaeda in the country from which it planned and conducted the 9/11 attacks. In the past year, our forces have reduced Taliban influence and arrested the momentum of al-Qaeda's allies, particularly in the Helmand and Kandahar provinces. Expanded special operations forces targeting of Taliban leadership and expanded local security measures at the village and district level have been an integral part of this momentum shift. Significant progress has also been made by the NATO training mission in the development of the Afghan National Security Forces. Yet it remains to be determined whether these gains will be lasting. Nevertheless, the President remains committed to redeploying troops in just 4 months. Similarly, uncertainty surrounds the recent uprising in the Middle East. While inspirational and likely to undermine extremism's appeal over the long term, they also potentially undermine several pillars of our strategic posture in the region in the near term. For example, I read with concern comments from opposition leaders in Egypt that the Camp David Accords are finished. Instability may undermine efforts to build our partners' counterterrorism capacity, a particularly troubling scenario in Yemen, where al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula continues to present the most significant risk to the U.S. homeland, according to the administration. Against the backdrop of these dramatic events, Iran continues research on key components for a nuclear weapon, the development of which alter the regional balance of power and allow Tehran to increase its long-standing support of terrorist proxies without fear of military retaliation. Also, we're scheduled to withdraw 50,000 U.S. forces from Iraq, despite questions regarding that country's ability to defend itself from both internal and external threats. The blistering pace of current events and the uncertainty they've created raise difficult and important questions for the future of our national security. To address these issues, we're fortunate to be joined today by 2 officers with long and distinguished careers of service to their nation. General James Mattis, Commander, U.S. Central Command, and Admiral Eric T. Olson, Commander, U.S. Special Operations Command. Gentlemen, I thank you for appearing here today and for your many years of service, devotion to your country. I take great comfort in knowing that warriors such as yourself are at the helm of leadership over so many great people that are laying their lives on the line every day on behalf of freedom around the world. Thank you for your service. Ranking Member Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With votes coming up so quickly, I will be very brief. I associate myself with the Chairman's remarks. I think he perfectly summed up the challenges the 2 of you face. I do want to give special recognition to Admiral Olson, since he's from Tacoma. I always have to mention that. Graduate of Stadium High School, not in my district, but it is the high school that my children would go to, so very close by. And I also, really enjoyed working with you during my time as chair of what was then the Terrorism Subcommittee, which had jurisdiction over SOCOM. Have the highest admiration for the job you do and the job the people you command do as well, and I appreciate that. And General Mattis, you have the greatest responsibility of the commanders right now in a very, very complicated part of the world, and you're meeting those challenges very well and serving us well. I look forward to hearing your testimony and hearing the questions of members about how we can help you to meet the challenges that both of you face. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Admiral Olson, this, I guess, is your last appearance before this committee. Is that correct? Last scheduled?
It is the last scheduled appearance, yes, sir.
Well, maybe we'll be fortunate and it won't be your last. Would you please begin, and then we'll hear from General Mattis.
Yes, sir, thank you. Good morning, Chairman McKeon and Representative Smith and other distinguished members of the committee. I do thank you for this opportunity to appear before you to present the current posture of the United States Special Operations Command. We at the Special Operations Command do recognize that we were created by the Congress, and our ability to meet our nation's high expectations is due in large part to this committee's continued strong support. And I'm especially pleased to share this hearing with my friend and teammate, General Jim Mattis. General Mattis's headquarters and mine are coincidentally located on the same base in Tampa, and we and our staffs work together quite closely. So with your permission, I'll submit my written posture statement for the record and open with some brief remarks. As Secretary Gates said in his speech at West Point last weekend, and as you noted, Mr. Chairman, we do not know with certainty what the future of warfare will hold. The range of security challenges we face beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, decentralization of al-Qaeda's network, revolutionary activity in the Middle East, destabilizing elements in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, increased intertwining of violent extremism and criminality, and persistence of piracy tell us that it will be complex, unpredictable, and unstructured. United States Special Operations Forces are universally recognized as key to our nation's ability to address all of these challenges and others. In many ways, U.S. SOCOM is a microcosm of the Department of Defense with ground, air, and maritime components, a global presence and authorities and responsibilities that mirror the military departments, military services, and defense agencies. We take pride in the diversity of our people and our mission. As the commander, I am responsible and accountable for the readiness of all Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Special Operations Forces. With a dedicated budget and through my component commanders, I select, organize, train, equip, and deploy these forces to serve all of our geographic combatant commanders. With 85% of our deployed forces currently in the Central Command area of operations, my colleague to my left is by far the largest customer of our product. We include many forces of legend: Green Berets, SEALs, Rangers, Air Force Air Commandos, Army Night Stalker aviators, combat controllers, pararescue jumpers, combatant craft crewmen, today's version of Marine Raiders, and others. The active duty practitioners of civil military operations and military information support operations are also in our ranks. These are special operations careerists. They are backed by a talented and dedicated assortment of administrative, intelligence, communications, engineering, logistics, and other specialists who serve in special operations units on a less permanent basis. And our various headquarters also include over 300 representatives from at least 15 other agencies within and beyond the Department of Defense. I'm convinced that the forces we provide to the geographic combatant commanders are the most culturally attuned partners, most lethal hunter-killers, and most responsive, agile, innovative, and efficiently effective advisors, trainers, problem solvers, and warriors that any nation has to offer. In fact, we have become the model for many of our partners. Our value comes from both our high level of skills and our non-traditional methods of applying them, which is to say that our principal asset is the quality of our people. Whether they are conducting a precision raid, organizing a village police force, arranging for a new school or clinic, or partnering with counterpart forces, they do so in a manner that has impressive effects. In Afghanistan and Iraq especially, it is undeniable that they have impact far above their relatively small numbers. And they are in dozens of other countries every day, contributing to regional stability by advising and training with counterpart forces. The balance of direct and indirect operations must be carefully managed, but because Special Operations Forces live in both of those worlds, we become the force of first choice for many missions. As Admiral Mullen said in his testimony yesterday, Special Operations Forces are first in and last out. I am proud of these forces, as we all should be, but I also acknowledge that there are challenges. Key among them is how to meet the increasing global requirement for their capabilities. The demand is outpacing the supply, but we can't grow them more than a very few % per year. Since 9/11, our total manpower has roughly doubled. Our budget has roughly tripled, and our overseas deployments have quadrupled. And as I have said recently, this great force is beginning to fray around the edges. The fabric is strong, the weave is tight, it's not unraveling, but it's showing signs of wear. For some elements of our force, time at home has become the abnormal condition to which the family must adjust. Partial solutions include finding a process that will habitually and predictably assign units from the services to train and deploy with Special Operations Forces, ensuring our needs for local training ranges are fully met, providing the buildings and facilities that our force needs and deserves, investing more heavily in capabilities that will relieve Special Operations Forces from duties that do not require our unique skills, expanding the service's inventory of specific assets that are so essential to today's complex and irregular warfare, and recognizing and incentivizing many non-traditional skills, such as language and micro-regional expertise, as essential military requirements. We must ensure that our forces have the specialized equipment and advanced training they need to survive and succeed in the complex, ambiguous, and often violent environments in which we ask them to serve, which requires professionalizing the acquisition workforce and streamlining procurement processes. Underlying all of this is the need to look after our people and their families. We must rehabilitate and return to duty those of our wounded who can, care for those of our wounded who can't, along with their families and caregivers, and provide enduring support to the families of those who have died in action. I ask for your action to approve a defense budget for fiscal year 2011 and for your support for the fiscal year 2012 budget proposal. I also ask that you carefully watch the Special Operations budget, particularly as forces eventually begin to draw down from major operations, because our Special Operations Forces will most likely be reallocated at the same levels to areas with pent-up demand for our unique capabilities, a point reinforced in Secretary Gates' testimony just yesterday. Thank you again for this opportunity to appear before you. You have reason to take great pride in what the men and women of Special Operations Forces are accomplishing around the world today and every day. I remain humbled by my opportunity to command this formidable force and provide it to answer our nation's most daunting security needs. And as I appear before you in this capacity for the fourth and most likely the last time, I am thankful for the profound honor of serving my country in this way. I stand ready for your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. General Mattis, I think this is your first time in this capacity.
In
Am I
this
correct?
capacity, yes, Chairman, it is.
Thank you. The time's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressman Smith, distinguished members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the posture and priorities of U.S. Central Command, testifying alongside a friend and shipmate of many years, Admiral Olson, Commander of U.S. Special Operations Command. I have submitted a written statement and request it be accepted into the record. Thank you for supporting our troops and their families who carry the brunt of the physical and emotional burden in this 10th year of war. Our forces today are among the most dedicated and skilled professionals I have served alongside in my 39 years in uniform, and they constitute a national treasure. I also recognize the commitment and sacrifices of our international partners who operate with us from the waters off Somalia to the mountains of Afghanistan, where the largest war-fighting coalition in recent history is engaged with troops from 49 nations united in the fight against our common enemy. The strategic landscape of the broader Middle East has been altered by recent events in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and elsewhere. We see pressure on government institutions from the aspirations of people seeking improved economic and social conditions. Young people born in the information age are exchanging ideas in real time. While the long-term impact of this unrest is unknown, it presents as many opportunities as it does challenges. The changes that we are seeing will manifest differently in each country. People are seeking their rights and, for the most part, doing so peacefully and bravely. It's too early to say how it will all turn out. It is important that we work today with the people and the governments throughout the region. We don't want to see this change slide into a new form of authoritarianism. So while there is both opportunity and danger, it requires unrelenting engagement by our nation. The central challenge for us, I believe, is how to make common cause with our friends throughout the region. There is one clear lesson we can draw from the dramatic changes underway. Now more than ever, we must remain relentlessly engaged with our military partners across the region. While we know each country is different, we remain committed to strengthening our military bonds and advancing our mutual interests in peace and opportunity for all. Notably, in Egypt, we have clearly seen the benefit of mature military-to-military relationships. The Egyptian armed forces continue to demonstrate exceptional discipline and restraint under trying circumstances, serving honorably. As Admiral Mullen recently noted, our assistance has helped the Egyptian military become the professional force that it is today, just as our military in turn has learned a great deal from our Egyptian counterparts who have contributed a stabilizing influence in this time of transition. Of course, we cannot achieve our broader objectives in the region through military means alone. Our efforts require coordination and a spirit of collaboration between highly integrated civilian-military teams. Our civilian colleagues need your full support, even in this difficult fiscal environment, to undertake their essential role in today's complex environment. Robust resourcing for the State Department's mission is one of the best investments for reducing the need for military forces to be employed. Together, our military leaders and diplomats not only represent a symbol of America's enduring commitment to this region, but they also build trust through partnerships that have an important stabilizing effect when trouble looms. CENTCOM's main effort is in Afghanistan, where, along with our Afghan and coalition partners, we are making undeniable security progress, though some of our gains remain fragile and reversible. Al-Qaeda in the border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan is under the most pressure they have experienced since 2001. Over the past year, our enemies have lost leaders, they've lost battle space, maneuver room, and the initiative. And the enemy's strategy has been undercut by the clear commitment of the international community and the Afghan government to begin this summer a process of fully transitioning responsibility to Afghanistan lead by 2014. I support the President's ongoing analysis of further growth for the Afghan National Security Forces. Their quantifiable and qualifiable growth in capability has been one of our greatest successes over this last year. With this improving quality and combat performance by the Afghan security forces, we are seeing the enemy's worst nightmare coming of age. The transition process will start with a limited, conditions-based withdrawal this year. Our overall campaign is on track in Afghanistan. Our successes, as General Petraeus has stated, entailed hard fighting and tough losses, and there will be tough fighting ahead as the enemy tries this spring to regain the initiative. Finally, we must also redouble our efforts in order to address the challenges in the areas of governance and development. Turning now to Pakistan, we are strengthening and deepening our security relationship with Islamabad, even as we work to overcome years of mistrust and misunderstanding on both sides. The Pakistanis have shifted a quarter of their army, 140,000 troops, to the western border, and we are now conducting hammer and anvil operations in close coordination with them on opposite sides of the border. Pakistan's military has conducted significant counterinsurgency ops in the past decade, and having suffered 2,757 troops killed and 8,549 wounded, while also responding to urgent humanitarian needs following devastating floods in 2010. In Iraq, we are helping a new, more stable country emerge in a turbulent region. Our commitment there is transitioning from a military to a civilian-led effort. I will note that the transition underway in Iraq has been enabled in large part thanks to the vital commitment and support of Congress for our troops on the ground, and I want to personally offer my thanks to you. As we transition to civilian lead in Iraq, it is essential that the State Department be sufficiently resourced to solidify relationships between the U.S. and Iraq. At CENTCOM, we need congressional authorities that enable us to continue advising, training, and equipping our Iraqi partners through the new Office of Security Cooperation Iraq. Looking ahead, we will redeploy our military forces from Iraq this year unless asked to stay by the Iraqi government and the U.S. government concurs. I anticipate al-Qaeda in Iraq and Iranian-sponsored proxies will attempt to execute sensational attacks against us in the coming months. Next, Iran. The greatest threat to long-term regional stability is a defiant Iran in its current state. We are countering the malign activities of the regime while bolstering relationships with our partners. Iran continues to rebuff international efforts for engagement, continues to coerce its own population, and continues to pursue activities disruptive to regional peace and stability, including supplying arms to militant proxies in Iraq and Afghanistan and supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon. But for the vibrant people of Iran, the regime is no giant. The regime's actions have thrown the economy into disarray, destroyed rapport with the bulk of the world, and spread hate and discontent across the region, steadily eroding any international support the regime could once muster. Despite the shrinking stature of the regime, I have no reason for optimism about Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapons capability, of its growing ballistic missile arsenal, and present destabilizing course. Across the region, we are disrupting al-Qaeda and other violent extremist organizations. We are actively focused on the threat of extremism in Yemen, especially al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the group that has twice attempted to attack our homeland in recent years. With our international partners, our special operations forces are putting our most violent enemies and related networks under increasingly intense pressure. At the same time, the populist-inspired changes that are taking place across the region undercut the message of al-Qaeda and other extremist groups, highlighting the bankrupt philosophies of terrorists who use violence and contribute nothing but mayhem to the innocent. In direct repudiation to violent extremists, young folks today have achieved more change in 10 weeks than 10 years of al-Qaeda's murderous campaigns. So that's a snapshot of our major ongoing operations. We are focused on a number of other important mission areas as well, to include countering piracy. There can be no more stark reminder about the need for more proactive diplomatic, legal, and military efforts against pirates than the brutal murder of 4 Americans by pirates last week. This is a defining moment for the people in this region, and by extension, a critical moment for CENTCOM to remain engaged with our partners and to clear away obstacles to peace and prosperity. On that note, while Israel and the Palestinian territories are not in my assigned theater, lack of progress toward a comprehensive Middle East peace affects U.S. and CENTCOM security interests in the region. I believe the only reliable path to lasting peace in this region is a viable two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. The issue is one of many that is exploited by our adversaries in the region, and it is used as a recruiting tool for extremist groups. The lack of progress also creates friction with regional partners and creates political challenges for advancing our interests by marginalizing moderate voices in the region. By contrast, substantive progress on the peace process would improve CENTCOM's opportunities to work with our regional partners and support multilateral security efforts. We know that you face tough decisions in this constrained fiscal environment, ladies and gentlemen. In all of our activities at CENTCOM, we honor the obligation to be the best stewards possible of our nation's monetary resources. CENTCOM has established stringent control mechanisms to execute our fiscal authorities and to apply increasingly effective oversight of all our programs. Finally, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, and Congresswomen, we must never forget the families of those who gave their last full measure in defense of liberty. Thank you once again for your support of our men and women serving in the Central Command region. I'm prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Without objection, both of your statements will be entered in the record. The vote schedule has changed. It's now 2 votes, so we will have to recess. But I will hold my questions till later, and I'll turn now to Ranking Member Smith. And we will, after his questions, we will recess for 10 to 15 minutes as soon as we can get back. Mr. Smith.
I will endeavor to do this quickly in light of that, and I just have 4 questions, and a couple of them, one of the things I'm doing with Congresswoman Giffords being out, I'm working with her staff to ask questions that she has as well. So 2 of these are hers and 2 of these are mine, but the first one that I do want you to get to, Admiral Olson, as quickly as possible, you have significant MILCON challenges. We've grown your force a lot in the last 5 or 6 years. We have not grown the facilities to accommodate it. Could you say just a couple of quick words about your needs in the MILCON area?
Yes, sir, we do have significant needs. There were disconnects between the growth of the force and growth in MILCON. And to add to that, we inherited buildings when Special Operations Command was created without inheriting a budget to recapitalize them. So we are in a state over the next 10 to 15 years of having to swallow this large chunk of MILCON recapitalization.
Yeah, and I just want the committee to be aware of that, and as we look at our budget efforts here, we should try to help out in any way we can. General Mattis, I have 2 questions, one of them from me, one of them from Congresswoman Giffords. She has an interest in the her interest is in the energy area, and you have considerable fuel requirements. You have been quoted as saying that you need to be unleashed from the tether of fuel and the challenges that presents. Efforts at generating alternatives and efficiencies can make a huge difference in you being able to prosecute the fights you need to prosecute. Can you tell us a little bit about your efforts in CENTCOM to deal with the challenges you have in the fuel area? And then an area that I'm particularly interested in is something that I read an article about just recently, and that is efforts to counter al-Qaeda's messaging over the internet. CENTCOM seemed to have gotten out front on that. I think this is critical. This is where they're spreading their ideology, certainly in your region, but throughout the world. This is how they're recruiting the people. They are doing it in an incredibly sophisticated way that we are woefully behind on. You guys seem to be stepping up and trying to address that. So could you talk a little bit about the fuel and about the internet ideological battle?
Yes, sir, I will. On the fuel, it's a significant Achilles heel for us. When you have to haul the amounts of fuel that we have to haul around the battlefield for the generators and for the vehicles. We are working with DARPA. We are working with a number of civilian organizations to try and find solutions. There are efforts underway to make more expeditionary bases, which would actually generate some of their own energy requirements using, for example, solar power. In many of these places, there's a lot of sunshine. If we can get expeditionary capability to capture that and then basically recharge our batteries, I mean, it's an amazingly complex effort to maintain the fuel lines. And it's also gives the enemy an ability to choose the time and place of attacking us. We're engaged with science and technology. We're engaged with DARPA, and we're looking at very pragmatic ways of doing this. We're also looking at what we can do to actually change how we distribute fuel to reduce the enemy's opportunities to come after us. And I could meet privately with you on some of those matters that I'd prefer not to speak about in open session. On the internet effort, the point I would make is that the enemy is using the internet exactly along the lines that you defined. They use it for recruiting is the one that comes immediately to mind. We can directly track some of this. In broad terms, we challenge their propaganda. We disrupt the recruiting. We show that it's silly to go down this line, that just doesn't make sense. We bring out the moderate voices. We amplify those. And in more detail, we detect and we flag if there is adversary, hostile, corrosive content in some open source web forum. We engage with the web administrators to show that this violates website provider policies. And probably more telling about how we engage here, we have a digital engagement team at CENTCOM. It's fully attributable, but we engage with the people in the region who come up on the web and start exchanging ideas, and we give factual and accurate information to counter enemy propaganda and lies through using the web and the blog sites. We do this in Arabic, Farsi, Urdu, and Pashto. Yeah. But we are engaged in the internet fight.
And this is something that I think DoD-wide and intelligence community-wide we have to be engaged in, because the way al-Qaeda has changed since 9/11, certainly the AQ senior leadership is still a threat, but the larger threat is the way they generate self-starters. sort of homegrown terrorists who go on the internet, get inspired by this stuff, and it has increased to a level that I think would shock a lot of people, and we need to be much more aggressive about that. The last question I have is on on non-lethal means of subduing the enemy. I'll take that one for the record. It's something Congresswoman Giffords is interested in as well. If you could just update us a little bit, Admiral, send something to us on the record about what you've been doing with non-lethal uses of force. There's been considerable advancement there. And I do just want to conclude by making a special thank you to the Special Operations Command and the Navy SEAL team in particular that shortly after the incident in Tucson went out on a mission in Congresswoman Giffords' honor. They actually flew a flag for that mission and then made sure that it got to her where she is rehabilitating. That means a great deal to her and to all of us. Your dedication and support for her and for this committee is very much appreciated, and certainly the work you do for our country is very much appreciated as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We will adjourn now for 10 to 15 minutes in time to vote and get back. Mr. Bartlett will be the first question when we get back. Thank you.
Yep, looks like it. Yep.
Test, test.